Trench Crusade is here. Well, it's been here for a little while, but the models are here. For me specifically right now, I just got my models shipped and I'm really excited to build and assemble my Trench Crusade gang? Crew? I don't know what they're called. For those of you who don't know, Trench Crusade is an alternate history skirmish tabletop game featuring extremely grim, dark imagery set in alternate World War I, where the Knights Templar accidentally unleashed real hell on Earth. And the 1,000-year conflict that spawned from that led to the current year of 1910s-ish. Blending sort of religious mythology with World War I aesthetics and the horrors of trench warfare, Trench Crusade brings a really unique spin, I think, to the alternate history sandbox. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't state that this does indeed feature thematics and imagery of religions that are currently practiced around the world. So if that is a sensitive topic for you, maybe this video isn't one for you to watch. For me personally, I really like the more mythological aspects of the Abrahamic religions, and things like biblically accurate angels and sorts of things of that aesthetic in nature. And so I was really drawn to the imagery and the very awesome art and illustrations done for Trench Crusade by its creator, whose name escapes me right now, but it will be on the screen. And the rules were designed by one of the legendary game designers of Mordheim as well. We got these awesome minis. There's not a whole, well, it's a very kit bash open system. There's not a lot for me to kit bash with these minis specifically, because they already look awesome and they're resin 3D printed. Really high quality prints, by the way. They seem super durable compared to a lot of other 3D printed things I've sort of dabbled with. But that's kind of beside the point. We're here today to get some awesome, simple Trench Crusade bases going that can tell a story. So let's hop right into this craft. Now, one of the mainstays of trench warfare is, of course, fighting in trenches. And in order to not have your feet get totally diseased and rancid, a system of duck boards, is what they were called, are put in the bottom of those trenches as the ground very quickly becomes super muddy and pretty much impassable, or at the worst, extremely difficult to navigate terrain. These duck boards are pretty much just planks of wood placed atop the mud to keep the soldiers' boots out of it and out of sticking into the ground and having the wetness sop into their boots, where they often don't get a chance to fully dry anything out for potentially days on end. I don't need to state, I hope, that this is a really bad situation for humans in general to be in, and we're dealing with some real horrific things that actually happened. So again, another sort of content warning here if you are sensitive to graphic descriptions of what happens during trench warfare. Maybe, again, not the video for you. I'll try to keep it on the slightly lighter side here and not get into the super gritty and super real details. This is, of course, a fantasy game about a not real world, and we're here to have fun with some miniatures on the table. So let's try to keep that in mind going forward. So the first thing we need to do to get these bases done is to lay down a layer of mud. And I'm just gonna use some generic texture paste for that. We're gonna step up its intensity a little bit later to really get a nice muddy effect. But if I had one thesis about this basing video, it would be to do basing in layers. That's how you can really build up an effective storytelling via weathering and via the elements on the base. that all kind of coincide together to create a unique and narratively strong base for your miniatures to really showcase that they are, in fact, inhabiting the world that is depicted that they are supposed to be inhabiting. So once the texture paste is done, we're going to prepare our duck boards. It's actually probably a good idea to prepare these before you spread the paste on so you have enough time to work on before it fully sets. We're taking some coffee stirrers here. We're just going to take a wire brush and brush down some of these coffee stirrers, which are a nice sort of thickness for what we're looking for. Loosely approximating like a 2x4 type of timber at the miniature scale, or maybe a 2x6 or 2x8. I don't exactly know the dimensions, you know, I'm just deer crafting. But what we're doing with this wire brush is, you would think it would be to bring out a wood grain, but that shouldn't technically be visible at that scale for something that is manufactured like timber, like these planks would be. Instead, this is not meant to bring out the grain, but instead to just kind of beat them up a little bit to show that they've been under a high amount of weathering and duress. You could totally theoretically skip this step if you want, but it just takes about 5 seconds to do. I just lay down a couple of strips of the coffee stirrers on some double-sided tape, and then take my wire brush and just kind of hit them a bunch. But after that is done, we start trimming them to length, and before our texture paste is fully affixed and cured, we start pushing them into that muddy base. And I've found like the best way to do this is probably just to hold up your stick to the base and then kind of cut it where it would make sense. Because these are circular bases, you're going to have some planks that are longer than others and some that are shorter than others. I did try to create some spots in the middle where it would be two planks meeting up and joining to simulate more realistically that these are in fact longer pieces of timber than they would suggest just by being on this circular base. I also made their kind of construction a little bit more haphazard and loose in some areas to, again, sort of simulate a battle-worn and rugged situation where perhaps some of the construction of the trench is starting to fail. And to hammer that point home, after all of our planks are in place, we hit little spots above the boards with some more of our muddy texture and lay that to wait. Again, creating this nice interlocking layer of mud and duckboard that will fuse together really well to create a really sort of convincing scenario going forward. After the paste is set and dried, we can start hitting things with paint. There are other elements to add to this base, but because of the layers required in this weathering, we need to start painting first. Hitting it with a mix of dark brown and black paint for the mud, and just putting that all over everything, because that's going to be the darkest layer on our base, and then just coming back in with that dark brown over the planks. Now you might be thinking that's not enough contrast for the planks to be, and you could certainly make them lighter if you want to. I'm purposely keeping these bases quite dark because I'm thinking of a lighter paint scheme for my miniatures, and that is going to lead to them being a lot more contrasted with the base that they're on in the final product. First, we are going to be hitting the planks with some old dried blood effects. This is a war zone. It's going to be bloody. Not only is it a war zone, it's a war zone with demons and devils, so it's going to be pretty violent, probably. So we're going to start getting some sort of blood streaks and things that have kind of soaked into the duckboards, represented by this older, dried, dark blood effect. And then, this is a totally optional step, but I find it adds a really interesting piece of kind of uniqueness. Instead of just being a trench, this is a Trench Crusade trench. What I've done here is I've actually found a period accurate edition of a Bible in a French translation printed in 1899, I think. Totally, copyright free in the public domain, and I've shrunk it to about 4% actual size and printed them out. I found that size is a really accurate for getting something that still looks like it has words. They're totally unreadable. You could use any words you want. It doesn't need to be an actual Bible. But I thought this would just be a really cool thing. No one can read any of the words on this. This is a totally unnecessary step. I just had a little bit of fun doing some historical research. So I decided to print that out at 4% scale. And of course I had to go with the Book of Revelation. It feels appropriate. And what we're gonna do here is first laboriously cut out each and every tiny piece of paper here, double-side printed to make sure that there's text on both sides and there's the appropriate amount of color on both sides of the pages. Theoretically, for a book printed at this time period appearing here, it wouldn't be as yellowed as it is, but because these are in the open air, they've clearly exploded out of a book or maybe being spread as propaganda or something like that. They've been exposed to the elements more than a normal book would, so I think this is an accurate sort of patina to these yellowed pages. And they're going to get a whole lot dirtier. But after we cut up all of these little pieces of paper, again, this takes a lot of time. You can skip this if you want. It's just something I wanted to do. We're going to put down some thinned PVA glue with water in, I don't know, maybe a 1/3 to 2/3 mix. I didn't really follow a recipe. I just kind of eyeballed it. I didn't even try this before either, and it worked out fine. So I think it's pretty forgiving. Put some of that on the base, stick your papers to the base, and then cover it again with more PVA to seal them there. And I found that this worked pretty well. They were a little bit fiddly getting into place sometimes. But one thing I tried to do to really kind of bring them to life is to make sure some of the edges were kind of curled into the air. Some of the pages were bent in places, pressed into the ground in other places, to really get a sense that these are just individual pages on the ground and not just like printed on texture into the base or something like that. These are actual separate objects in the world. And I think having some of those pages, having their corners lifted, folded, or pressed in, things like that, really adds that extra like 1% that takes this basing scheme over the top. After that is done, we quickly hit them with some fresh blood effects. And this time we're dealing with new sort of splatter type effects. So I'm just taking the edge of my paintbrush and kind of tapping it on the base, and it can get a little bit messy with this method. But I do think it provides a very nice kind of 2-scale blood spatter effect. And again, this is all about building the weathering in layers. We have the old blood dried into the duck boards, then we have this paper being blown onto the battlefield and new blood being thrown atop that, creating this very convincing sort of world piece. And then finally, we pick out all of the mud with a MIG wet effect, which you could totally do in an earlier stage as well, to bring out the wetness of the mud, because it was looking a little bit boring there. And that, I think, is that final step that really brings the mud and the duckboard contrast into much better alignment, with the mud being rather shiny and the duckboards being quite matte. So we have contrast in the base itself, and we have contrast with the models as they relate to the base. Now I just need to paint my dang guys. But I hope you enjoyed this basing tutorial. Aside from cutting out those tiny pieces of paper, it really was quite a quick process. I did all of this in probably a few hours, and if I pre-prepped those pages, maybe like 2 hours. You know, throw on a good podcast and you can get this done in no time. And then you have all the bases you need for your Trench Crew gang. I am personally doing Trench Pilgrims, so if you want to see those painted up, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I'm definitely going to be painting them in the future. And if you did enjoy this sort of basing tutorial, feel free to throw the video a like. It always helps the channel out. And tell me, what are your Trench Crusade plans in the comments below. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace!